My talk for today is seriously, and what I'm really wanting to talk about is lightheartedness. I get up here week after week and I talk about how I laugh at myself a lot. And I thought, what I really needed to do was explain to you the spiritual practice of it. Explain that I don't laugh at myself. I do. I just laugh at myself all the time, but that it's also become such a spiritual practice that it has actually led to healing. And I'm going to get to that further along in the talk. But for starters, I just want to let you know that there's a power, and that those who have found that lightheartedness have been some of the greatest supporters and movers in the world. Yeah. There's this great story about Mother Teresa. She's gathered up 50 kids who had been living on the street and called a meeting of the adults, and many showed up because of how much they respected her. And she said, "Who's going to adopt these kids? They've been living on the street." And not a single person said a word. So she chuckled. She didn't get upset. She didn't get annoyed. She chuckled. And then she picks up one kid and goes, "Well, how about this one? Who'll take this one?" And everybody laughed. And then somebody stepped forward and said, "Okay, I'll take that one." And then she held up another one, said, "Who'll take this one?" And somebody stepped forward, and she did this over and over until all 50 kids were adopted. So being lighthearted doesn't mean you're not doing good work in the world. It just means you're coming from a place of knowing that lightheartedness is actually one of the most powerful things you can do. The Dalai Lama knows that. So I am so happy to hear those kids back. I've been missing that. Thank you for being here. So I saw a movie. I can't remember the name of the movie. It was years ago. It was a father and a son sitting on a bench. The son was in first grade. And the son was telling the dad that his heart was broken because a girl in the class did not return his love. And that he was so devastated by that and would never love again. And the dad catches himself from breaking out laughing, and with full compassion in his heart, was there with his son. And I think that's our relationship with our higher self. That we're like first graders in how we behave here to our soul. And that wise, all-knowing being, that infinite being, is constantly there seeing the humor in our taking stuff seriously and wants to be present and compassionate with us and loving with us for it. I think sometimes this particular idea of soul's intention and the infinite nature of it may be hard to grasp because the word infinite is so large and unwieldy. So I'd like to do a little process with you, okay? And what I want you to do is use your imagination in what I'm about to say. First, I want another drink. Imagine that you knew with absolute certainty that you were going to live for 1,000,000 years. Forget the infinite. Let's just talk 1,000,000 years. Infinite's a lot bigger than that, but let's go 1,000,000 years. Imagine that you knew with absolute certainty that you were going to live for 1,000,000 years. And now imagine that you've already lived 200,000 of those years. You got 800,000 more to go, but you've lived 200,000 years. You were around to watch Homo sapiens the first time they walked on Earth. You were around the making of those tools. You were around when the hunters hunted, the gatherers gathered. You were around. Imagine this, that you watched all this going on. You were there. You saw it. You saw the agricultural revolution come into play where kingdoms and people started coming together in more than just tribes. They started to come together in larger and larger groups, creating cities, and then all of a sudden they were kings. You got to witness all those kingdoms rising, those empires rising and falling. The Egyptians, the Persians. You witnessed, imagine that you were there and witnessed all of that. You witnessed death, pestilence. You were there the first time human beings took other human beings and put them into slavery. You were there. Imagine that. You saw all this. You saw the extinctions that happened at the end of the Ice Age. The saber-toothed tiger, the cave bear. You were there. You saw all this. And then after seeing all these things for 200,000 years, forgetting the idea of whether reincarnation is true or not, imagine after 200,000 years of witnessing all this, all of a sudden you get born into a body yourself. And all of a sudden now you're feeling all these emotions and sensations and all these things going on, and it's really overwhelming, and you completely forget that you were around for the 200,000 years and watched all these things happen. You forget because you're so overwhelmed by what's happening right here in front of you. And then one day, while you're freaking out about this life and doing everything you can to figure out what to do in this life, you have an event that gives you a glimpse of what you used to know. Just a little glimpse. Maybe it was through a weekend workshop or whatever, but meditation. But all of a sudden, you get this little glimpse and you go, oh, right. This is silly. I'm making this, what's happening here right now, silly, as if it's never happened before, as if this is brand new, as if there's something going on here that will change the course of history when history has done all these things for 200,000 years. Oh, and you crack up laughing. Because it's funny as heck that you've taken this so seriously, this little thing, but then you forget again. And all of a sudden you're back and you're walking around and you're dealing with this and you're dealing with that, and oh my God, what happened here? And you've lost that sense of knowing the bigger picture. You're back being the first grader who thinks this is it, who thinks this is all there is. I'm back being the first grader. I'm not separating us here. I do it too. And then you get a second glimpse. A second glimpse. And then if you practice enough, maybe you get a third. I've been practicing long enough where I get these glimpses almost every day now. Almost every day, I get to see a little glimpse of the largeness of who I and you are. The largeness, the fact that we are infinite. So I'm talking 200,000 years. Well, we've actually been around to watch galaxies form, galaxies disappear. Imagine having that perspective as we walk through our day, that actually we're so large. We've seen galaxies come and go. And so we're taking this seriously. We're thinking this is real. We think this is what's so important, as if there wasn't other civilizations before ours that did these things and worse to people when we're looking at the horrifying things that go on, and that we survived anyway. We have witnessed billions of people come and go on this planet. So what are you taking seriously? And that doesn't mean we shouldn't have compassion, because there are billions of people who will never get a glimpse. And that's where compassion comes in. For all those who may or may not ever get a glimpse of the truth of who they are. But we get to have that. That's what this teaching is all about. We get to rise. We get to feel the greater sense of ourselves and recognize that whatever is happening here is a blip. You know, you've heard me say this before. I was just saying it last week. It's a blip. We're going to blink and we're going to go, wow, where did my life go? Where did all those years go? They went by so fast. When we feel that sensation, that is our higher self, knowing the infinite of who we are. Because being in these bodies is a blip compared to the hugeness of who we actually are. We are these people who get this opportunity to come and just have this blip. How do you want to spend it? How do you want to spend this time? Now, the funniest thing about this for me, well, one of the funny things about this for me, is when I was young, I understood the shortness of life, but I took it so darn seriously. I was really concerned about how I was spending my time and what I was doing, to the point where it would actually drive me crazy. And so now, and that's because the reason, and I realize now that it drove me crazy, because I didn't realize the infinite nature of the me that's bigger than this me. You know, I like to talk about the difference between the ego, our small self, and our soul, our higher self. And this isn't about getting rid of the ego, because the ego is our manifestation of the emanation of the uniqueness of who we are. It's how we express ourselves on this planet. So it's not about getting rid of it. It's just recognizing the childish nature of it in thinking whatever's going on is so darn important. That in fact, the more we can laugh at ourselves, the more we can have compassion for ourselves, that they actually go hand in hand. And the more we have compassion for ourselves, the more we have compassion for others. So laughing at ourselves is the spiritual practice that I have been doing for decades now, laughing at myself every time I remember. Now, I still forget. I still get caught up like anybody else. I am no enlightened being, but I have enlightened moments. And those moments are brilliant, and they're wonderful, and they feed me in the remembrance that this isn't so serious, that whatever I've taken seriously isn't, that it's just a blip, and that I get to have compassion for myself and for anybody else I'm in that, what some call the drama triangle. If I'm caught in that, I get to have compassion around that. I go, oh, there, I did it again. I got caught in the drama triangle. Isn't that hilarious? You know? I mean, that's the thing about it is, if when you take a look at it that way, you see that there have been people walking this earth that have gone through so much of the same things we have. It was a different time, a different place. I was listening to somebody, Tom Hanks was giving the speech at Harvard, and he said that every single graduating class knows that the world is almost at the end, and that this is the turning point and they get to do it. Every class feels that way, that they're the ones that are going to turn things around. And it isn't that they may or may not, it's the seriousness in which they think that's the moment at which, if they don't, things will go so terrible. Things will be worse than they've ever been. Things were pretty bad 100,000 years ago. Things were pretty bad 15,000 years ago. Things were pretty bad 500 years ago. I'm a student of history. I love reading about history. And the first time, my very first talk here, I mentioned to you that perspective is everything. And that's what we're talking about here today, is perspective. Do we have this perspective of our egos that say, this little thing that's going on right now is the be-all, end-all, and this is what I've got to concentrate on? Or will we have the perspective of shifting to that place of knowing that our soul knows better? Our soul is the adult here. Our soul is the adult in the room. But who's leading the way? So this isn't about getting rid of the ego. It is about who's leading the way. And so I had a couple of pretty remarkable healings this week. I mean, the healings I don't think happened this week. I think this was simply the week I recognized them. Ever since I was a kid, I felt like there was this gigantic hole in my chest. And I felt unloved, uncared for. I didn't trust anything or anybody. And I spent almost all my life feeling that way. The outcropping of that is, I've told you guys about my ulcerative colitis that came and went, and Crohn's and some other diseases I had. But another one is that I would wake up in the middle of the night crying my eyes out, feeling terrified of life and vulnerable to it all. That was most of my life. And just this week, I realized that hadn't happened in years. That it hit me that I couldn't remember the last time I woke up in the middle of the night feeling that way. And for me, that was remarkable that I could have that level of healing simply through my spiritual practice. Spiritual practice is simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. It's not a complex thing where you've got to do all these different things. But for me, it was simply doing my practices that opened me up that there's something larger going on here, that I could remember that and laugh at myself about it. I intentionally look for something to laugh at every single day. That is one of my spiritual practices. It's a main one. Laughing has been the greatest healing of my life. I do it a lot and often. How many here laugh every day? Raise your hand if you laugh every day. Excellent. Okay. How many of you laugh at yourself every day? Excellent. That is a great spiritual practice. So we're going to try a little exercise here of sharing something about ourselves that made us laugh. So I'll start. I was living in a cabin in the woods. I was running a little late one day. I had shaved and I was brushing my teeth, and now I had some mouthwash in my mouth, as I'm thinking, wow, I bought this aftershave. I've never tried aftershave. Let me give this a shot. So I put some in my hand. I rubbed it in my hand. I went like this. And boom, the mirror is covered in mouthwash. Now, it's your turn. I want you to turn to the person next to you, somebody near you, and tell them something embarrassing and funny about you. And if you're not willing to do that, notice that as well. Light-heartedness, right? Taking ourselves lightly. How does that feel? This is the key to light-heartedness. Being able to do this, to be light, to have fun with this. In some famous book, it says, to get our bloated selves out of the way. That's the practice. That's a deep spiritual practice. This may feel, like light and fun, and it's a deep spiritual practice. The possibilities of this are healing, decreased suffering, higher levels of compassion. Lightheartedness is everything. And we get there when we're willing to take ourselves lightly and have compassion for ourselves in that. This is living your soul's intention. When you feel like this, when you look at yourself from this perspective, that's your soul's intention. When we get serious, when we think something has to be a particular way, that's our ego. That's our smaller self. And our adult should be telling our first grader, hey, don't worry, you'll love again. Don't worry, it's going to be okay. Don't worry. Life continues past this. Whatever you're angry at or upset about, it's going to be okay. Let your soul, the adult, tell the first grader as often as the first grader needs to hear it. Mine does a lot. Every day, several times a day, at least. Because it's easy to forget, Stuff happens. This world happens. And then we're in it. And if you are in it in a lighthearted manner, you will not only suffer less, you'll get better results. The people who understand that lightheartedness actually leads to incredible results in life, those are the ones who are really having fun here. That's what's possible. That's what we teach here. This is the idea. And so why don't we end with a meditation? How about that? So get comfortable. Close your eyes if you want to. Take a deep breath and relax. And imagine yourself on a path. It is the perfect path. It is your path. How it feels beneath your feet, the air against your skin, the sounds, the smells, that whatever is perfect for you. And it leads you to a clearing. Maybe a clearing that's inside or outside, that depends on you and what is perfect for you. This is your sanctuary. And there's a chair in the middle. It is the perfect chair, so perfect that when you sit in it, your entire body goes, ah. Now take another deep breath and relax even more. Now imagine standing before you in whatever form it is your soul, your higher self, benevolent, wise, all-knowing, right there with you. Imagine this beingness and ask the question, what is my next step in living my soul's intention? What is my next step in living my soul's intention? And receive the answer. Now imagine melting with this higher self that is you, melting together, melding together. A deeper and deeper connection, a deeper and deeper glimpse of your higher self being present in your daily life. Feel this melding. Feel your heart become lighter, more joyous, more compassionate, more loving, more joy, more laughter, opening you to the wonder of what possibilities truly are there for you. Thank yourself. Thank yourself for taking this time with yourself. Thank yourself. And when you're ready, come on back into the room. We are infinite beings, infinite, having a miraculous experience inside a body, inside an ego, and yet we're so much larger than that. When we're done here, we go back to being infinite beings. What we get to have here is the reminder of that's who we really are as we go about our day. Light-heartedness is the key. Laugh at yourself often. Make it an intention. Make it a spiritual practice. It's totally worth it and way more healing than I could have ever imagined. Thank you. I love you.